The time is 3:44 p.m. The Persian Gulf, 22 nautical miles northeast of Bahrain, in the shallow central corridor of the Gulf, where the water averages 31 meters deep, and the afternoon haze has reduced visibility to approximately 8 nautical miles. The specific kind of Gulf afternoon visibility that is not poor enough to complicate operations, but is hazy enough to make distant contacts slightly indistinct at the margins. The sun is at an angle that places it low in the western sky and makes looking west from a vessel or aircraft difficult without eye protection. The USS Mesa Verde, LPD-19, a San Antonio-class amphibious transport dock ship, is running northeast at 11 knots on a logistics transit from Bahrain Naval Support Activity toward a rendezvous with the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit operating further east. The Mesa Verde is not a warship in the sense that a destroyer is a warship. She carries Marines, landing craft, and the logistical architecture of amphibious operations rather than the missile magazine and aegis system of a surface combatant. She has a 30mm gun system and rolling airframe missile launchers for close-in defense. She has an AN/SLQ-32 electronic warfare suite. She has 2 SH-60 Seahawk helicopters in her hangar. One of those helicopters is currently airborne. The SH-60B Seahawk, call sign Reaper 22, departed the Mesa Verde's flight deck 41 minutes ago on a surface surveillance mission tasking that covers the northeastern sector of the Gulf between Bahrain and the Iranian island of Qeshm. This is standard tasking for amphibious ships transiting the Gulf. The helicopter provides the elevated sensor picture that the ship's own surface search radar cannot produce against small, low-profile contacts in the Gulf's cluttered coastal environment. At 3,000 feet and 120 knots, the Reaper 22 crew, a pilot and a sensor operator in the right and left seats, respectively, has been running a methodical surveillance pattern for the past 37 minutes. They have logged 11 surface contacts. None of them have been interesting. At 3:44 p.m., Contact 12 appears on the sensor operator's display. Small surface contact, bearing 048 degrees from the helicopter's current position, range 4.1 nautical miles. Speed approximately 22 knots. Radar cross-section consistent with a Peykaap-class fast-attack craft. The sensor operator reported it to the pilot with the standard brevity: ___, quote, _0, ___. The pilot acknowledged and began a gentle left turn to put the contact on the helicopter's nose for visual acquisition. Standard procedure: the sensor operator activated the FLIR turret to acquire the contact optically. The contact at 4 nautical miles was visible. A fast attack craft consistent with Peykaap configuration, running northeast on a heading that would not intersect the Mesa Verde's track. It was not approaching the ship. It was running parallel, roughly, to the transit lane. The kind of IRGCN patrol presence that is routine in the Gulf and that the crew logged and continued monitoring. At 3:46 p.m. and 14 seconds, the pilot saw a bright green flash from the direction of the contact. Bright green, coherent, pulsed, not a reflection, not a navigation light. A directed beam pointed at the helicopter from the surface contact 4 nautical miles away. The pilot reacted in the 0.3 seconds that trained aviators react to unexpected optical events. He looked away from the flash, raised his visor, and closed his eyes. He had been briefed on directed energy harassment. He had been told what to do. He did it. He was not fast enough entirely. The flash had reached him before his trained reflex closed his eyes. He estimated, in the debrief that would happen later, with the clinical precision that aviators use to describe physiological events, that his eyes had been exposed to the beam for approximately 0.2 seconds. 0.2 seconds of a military-grade laser designator directed at an aircraft cockpit from 4 nautical miles produced in the pilot's left eye a central visual disturbance, a scotoma, in the clinical language of the debrief, that occupied approximately the central 30 degrees of his visual field. Not blindness. A bright afterimage, a visual disruption, the specific and disorienting effect of a retinal exposure to a coherent optical source more powerful than the eye is designed to receive. He could still see. He could see the instruments. He could see the horizon. He could not, clearly, see the contact that had fired the laser. "I have a laser hit," he said on the intercom, voice flat and professional, in the way that aviators are trained to be flat and professional about physiological events during flight. "Left eye, central visual disruption. I can maintain aircraft control." The sensor operator looked at the FLIR display. The contact was still visible, still at approximately 4.1 nautical miles, now beginning what appeared to be a turn to starboard, away from the helicopter. "Contact is turning away," the sensor operator reported. "Still tracking." The pilot was flying the helicopter with his right eye primary and left eye affected. He was doing this correctly, scanning instruments, maintaining altitude and heading, managing the aircraft with the systematic methodology of someone who is trained for exactly this scenario. But he was doing it with a visual disruption in his left eye that was affecting his depth perception and his peripheral vision on the left side in ways that made instrument scanning slower and more demanding than normal. He keyed the radio to the Mesa Verde. "Mesa Verde, Reaper 22. Emergency advisory. We have received a directed energy strike, probable laser, from IRGCN contact bearing 048, 4.1 miles. Pilot has visual disruption, left eye. Aircraft is under control. Request immediate guidance." The Mesa Verde's watch officer had the call within 4 seconds of transmission. The commanding officer was on the bridge circuit within 11 seconds, quote 6, quote 7. The Mesa Verde's commanding officer made 3 decisions in rapid sequence. Order the second SH-60 to immediate launch preparation, notify 5th Fleet on the emergency circuit, and begin the legal and evidentiary documentation processes that a directed energy strike on a U.S. military aircraft requires. The legal and evidentiary piece was, in the immediate term, as important as the tactical response. A directed energy strike on a U.S. military helicopter in international airspace is not a minor incident. It is an act of deliberate harm to a U.S. service member. The documentation of that act, precise, verifiable, time-stamped, technically characterized, is the foundation of everything that follows it. The diplomatic protest, the military response planning, the intelligence dissemination, and the operational changes that would result from this specific incident. This is the operational texture of laser harassment in the Gulf. The weapon itself is less dangerous than a missile. Its consequences are more complicated than a missed missile. A laser that reaches a cockpit and causes visual injury creates legal, medical, diplomatic, and intelligence obligations simultaneously, and each of those obligations requires documentation that the Mesa Verde's team was now generating at pace. The Mesa Verde's AN/SLQ-32 had been collecting since the contact first appeared on the surface picture. Because the SLQ-32 collects continuously on every contact in its coverage envelope. At 3:44 p.m., 2 minutes before the laser event, the SLQ-32 had logged an emission from the fast attack contact that had not been in its initial contact characterization. A narrow-band optical emission on a wavelength consistent with a NDY-AG laser, neodymium-doped yttrium aluminum garnet, a laser technology that produces green or infrared coherent light and that is used in both military laser rangefinders and laser designators. The emission had lasted approximately 0.8 seconds at 3:44 p.m., a brief activation that had not produced the helicopter's alert response because it had not been directed at the cockpit in that first instance. It had been followed by a 12-second pause and then the 3:46 p.m. activation that had reached the pilot's eyes. The 3:44 p.m. emission was a ranging activation. The laser operator on the fast attack craft had activated the system at 3:44 p.m. to measure the helicopter's precise distance and had then waited 12 seconds while making an aiming adjustment before activating the system in the direction of the cockpit at 3:46 p.m. The SLQ-32's wavelength characterization of both activations, the ranging pulse and the directed pulse, was complete. The laser's operating wavelength was 532 nanometers, consistent with a frequency-doubled IRGCN system operating in the visible green spectrum. At 532 nanometers, the beam was not invisible. At 4.1 nautical miles against a helicopter crew wearing standard flight helmets with lowered sun visors, which the pilot had not been wearing because the approach had been into the sun from the east rather than from the west. The beam had sufficient energy density at range to cause the visual disruption that had been reported. The 12-second interval between ranging activation and directed activation was itself a data point. It characterized the laser operator's adjustment procedure: ranging, pause, aim correction, directed employment. The procedure implied training, not improvisation. Someone had drilled this. The 12-second interval would be noted in the intelligence product as a behavioral characteristic of this specific employment method. At 3:48 p.m., Reaper 22 began a controlled return to the Mesa Verde at reduced speed. The pilot was maintaining aircraft control without difficulty, but was operating with degraded visual function that made the return transit 9.4 nautical miles at 90 knots, a procedure that required greater deliberateness than normal. He flew it correctly. He flew it professionally. He flew it with the flat determination of someone who is aware that their eye hurts and who has decided that awareness is not going to change anything about how they fly the aircraft home. The sensor operator maintained continuous tracking of the IRGCN contact throughout the return transit. The contact had turned north and was increasing speed. 28 knots now, heading toward Iranian territorial waters at the edge of the Gulf's northern margin. The sensor operator's FLIR maintained track until the contact entered the thermal haze near the Iranian coast and became difficult to maintain optically. The radar track continued. The second SH-60, Reaper 21, launched from the Mesa Verde's flight deck at 3:51 p.m., climbed to 2,500 feet, and was vectored toward the IRGCN contact's last known position. Reaper 21's crew was briefed on the laser event before launch. They were wearing ballistic eye protection rated for laser hazard. They had the contact's last position, course, and speed from the sensor operator's continuous tracking. Their mission was documentation, not interdiction, to maintain visual and electronic contact with the IRGCN fast attack craft and produce the corroborating evidence record that the legal and intelligence picture required. Reaper 22 landed on the Mesa Verde's flight deck at 3:54 p.m. The pilot shut down and was met by the ship's flight surgeon within 90 seconds of rotor brake. The flight surgeon's examination, conducted in the medical bay with the ophthalmoscope and visual acuity testing equipment that San Antonio-class ships carry, confirmed what the pilot had reported: a central scotoma in the left eye, approximately 25 degrees diameter, with reduced visual acuity in the affected zone. The scotoma was consistent with a laser-induced retinal event. The flight surgeon classified it as a serious injury, requiring immediate evacuation for specialist ophthalmological evaluation, and placed the pilot on immediate non-flight status. The pilot's eye had been injured, not destroyed, not permanently blinded. The prognosis, the flight surgeon noted carefully in the medical record, was uncertain pending specialist evaluation, but the injury profile was consistent with recoverable damage in the majority of similar cases. The prognosis was uncertain because laser retinal injuries are complex and the extent of damage is not immediately apparent from field examination. The pilot was medically evacuated to the Bahrain Naval Medical Center by a second helicopter at 4:37 p.m. He went aboard the aircraft wearing laser protective eyewear and keeping his right eye on the horizon, and his injured eye closed and his thoughts, presumably, in the specific private space that injured service members occupy when they are being moved from the place where something happened to the place where something will be done about it. The Mesa Verde continued northeast. Reaper 21 had maintained contact with the IRGCN fast attack for 18 minutes before the contact entered Iranian territorial waters at 4:09 p.m. During those 18 minutes, the crew had documented the contact's visual configuration, hull markings, antenna layout, approximate crew size visible on deck, and the location on the bow deck where the laser system appeared to be mounted, based on the geometry of the original emission and the visible equipment arrangement at the resolution available at 3.2 nautical miles at 2,500 feet. The laser system's mounting position was forward of the main cabin, on a swivel mount visible as a cylindrical housing approximately 0.4 meters in length. The FLIR's resolution at 3.2 nautical miles could not characterize the system's specific model, but the cylindrical housing dimensions and mounting configuration were documented and would be compared against known IRGCN optical systems in the intelligence product. At 4:11 p.m., the Mesa Verde's commanding officer had a communication with Fifth Fleet that covered 3 topics: the pilot's medical status and evacuation, the diplomatic protest that Fifth Fleet would coordinate with the U.S. Embassy in Bahrain for delivery to the Iranian government, and the operational guidance question of whether the Mesa Verde's transit should continue on its scheduled route. Fifth Fleet's guidance: continue on scheduled route. The transit was not modified in response to the laser event. Modifying the route would constitute a response to the provocation that the Iranian side could interpret as successful deterrence. The laser had changed U.S. behavior. Fifth Fleet's assessment: was that the laser had not changed U.S. behavior in any operationally significant way, and that the transit route documentation should reflect this. The Mesa Verde continued northeast at 11 knots. The route was unchanged. Now, the intelligence picture, assembled across multiple domains from the 3:44 p.m. first detection to the contact's entry into Iranian waters at 4:09 p.m. The SLQ-32's wavelength and energy characterization of the laser, 532 nanometers, NDYAG, frequency doubled, energy output estimated from the pilot's retinal exposure at approximately 0.8 millijoules at the reported range, characterized the system as a specific class of military laser rangefinder or designator. At this wavelength and energy level, the system is consistent with several Iranian-manufactured and procured laser systems, including a family of laser rangefinder systems that has appeared in IRGCN inventory documentation from previous collection events. The two-activation employment pattern, ranging pulse, pause, directed employment, was compared against the tactical employment procedures documented in previous collection on IRGCN laser harassment incidents. The 12-second adjustment interval was shorter than the 18 to 22-second intervals documented in two prior incidents, suggesting either improved training, a different targeting procedure, or a different operator. The interval difference was flagged for longitudinal comparison as the incident database grew. The fast attack craft's hull configuration, documented by Reaper 21's FLIR across 18 minutes of continuous observation, was compared against the known IRGCN fast attack inventory. The laser mounting position and configuration, cylindrical housing, swivel mount, forward bow placement, was new to the documentation. Previous collection had noted IRGCN fast attack craft equipped with laser rangefinders mounted at various positions, but this specific mounting configuration had not been documented for the Peykaap-class. The configuration was added to the library as a variant. The ranging activation at 3:44 p.m., the pre-employment ranging pulse, was itself an intelligence product. It demonstrated that the IRGCN operator had used the laser system for ranging before employing it against the cockpit, which implies a training procedure that includes ranging verification before directed employment. This procedure was not previously documented as a standard IRGCN laser harassment protocol. The combined intelligence product covered laser system characteristics, employment procedure, fast attack hull variant with optical system mount, and behavioral profile for IRGCN, directed energy harassment operations against airborne platforms. It was distributed to 5th Fleet, Naval Air Forces Pacific, and the Naval Aerospace Medical Research Laboratory, which maintains the military's research database on laser ocular hazards, and whose interest in real-world laser exposure parameters from operational incidents is standing and documented. The medical product, the pilot's exposure parameters, the flight surgeon's field examination results, and the specialist ophthalmological evaluation that would follow at Bahrain Naval Medical Center would be entered into the military's Laser Incident Reporting System as a confirmed operational laser exposure event. This reporting feeds the database that informs laser hazard assessment, protective eyewear requirements, and the operational procedures that U.S. aircrews follow when operating in environments where laser harassment has been documented. The pilot's case would, in due course, become a data point in that database. A data point about retinal exposure at 4.1 nautical miles from a 532 nanometer source. Exposure duration 0.2 seconds. Energy estimated at 0.8 millijoules at range. Resulting injury characterized and tracked through recovery. Data points from operational exposures are rarer and more precisely characterized than data points from controlled laboratory events, and the medical research community treats them accordingly. At 5:15 p.m., the U.S. Embassy in Bahrain delivered a diplomatic protest to the Iranian interest section, the formal channel used when Iran and the U.S. need to communicate formally without the diplomatic infrastructure of an embassy relationship. The protest described the incident in precise technical and legal terms, demanded accountability for the directed energy employment against U.S. military personnel, and referenced the specific legal framework under which deliberate laser employment against military aircraft constitutes a serious violation of international law and the laws of armed conflict. The protest was formal, specific, and documented. It would not produce an Iranian acknowledgement, apology, or accountability. The diplomatic outcome of these incidents is predictable from historical precedent. But the protest was not primarily intended to produce those outcomes. It was intended to create an official record, precisely time-stamped and formally delivered, that documented the United States' legal position and the specific facts as they had been established by the SLQ-32 collection, the pilot's debrief, and the medical examination. The record mattered. Records from incidents like this one accumulate over years into a documented pattern that is referenced in legal proceedings, policy decisions, and operational planning across multiple levels of the U.S. government. The IRGCN fast attack craft had disappeared into Iranian territorial waters at 4:09 p.m. Whether its crew understood the full scope of what had been documented about their employment, the laser wavelength, the ranging procedure, the 12-second interval, the hull configuration with the optical system mount, was not knowable from the Mesa Verde's sensor picture. They knew they had fired a laser at a U.S. helicopter. They knew the helicopter had returned to its ship. Whether they knew that their employment procedure, their system characterization, and their fast attacks hull variant had been added to a database that informs how U.S. aircrews equip themselves and what procedures they follow in future Gulf operations, that was not available to them. It is now available to every U.S. aircrew that receives the updated Arabian Sea and Persian Gulf laser hazard brief, which was updated based on this incident's intelligence product within 72 hours of the Mesa Verde's after-action report reaching 5th Fleet. The pilot was evaluated by an ophthalmologist at Bahrain Naval Medical Center at 6:30 p.m. The specialist's initial assessment was consistent with the flight surgeon's field evaluation, a laser-induced scotoma, extent to be determined by follow-up imaging, prognosis cautiously favorable. The pilot would not fly for a minimum of 30 days pending specialist clearance. The Mesa Verde arrived at her rendezvous with the 26th MEU at 7:42 p.m., 41 minutes behind the original schedule. The delay attributable to the reduced transit speed during the Reaper 22 recovery and the second helicopter launch operations. 41 minutes. The Marines of the 26th MEU were informed that the ship had been slightly delayed. They were not informed of the specific reason, because operational security and the need-to-know principle apply to medical evacuation circumstances as they apply to other operational matters. The rendezvous was completed. The logistics transfer was conducted. The Mesa Verde turned back toward Bahrain on her return transit. The Gulf continued being the Gulf. The laser had fired. The helicopter had returned. The pilot's eye was being evaluated by specialists. The intelligence product was distributed. The diplomatic protest was delivered. The hull variant was in the database. The employment procedure was documented. An IRGCN fast attack boat had used a directed energy system against a U.S. military helicopter and had achieved a temporary visual disruption in one crew member's left eye. It had also achieved an operational intelligence record that would inform how the U.S. military equips, trains, and briefs air crews operating in the Persian Gulf for the foreseeable future. Iranian state media covered the incident at 8 p.m. as a successful demonstration of IRGCN capability to deter and warn American military aircraft operating in Iranian-claimed waters. The coverage did not include the wavelength characterization. The coverage did not include the 12-second interval documentation. The coverage did not include the 30-day flight status restriction or the specialist evaluation in Bahrain. The coverage did not include the laser incident database entry or the updated aircrew brief. The coverage included the assertion that IRGCN forces had successfully warned off an American military aircraft. The aircraft had returned to its ship, recovered normally, and the ship had continued on its scheduled route unchanged. That is what warned off looked like from the Mesa Verde's track log. The Gulf absorbs everything. The documentation keeps it all. Bye for now.